Hi, everyone. This is a meet and greet for our Charleston City Council candidates. We're going to be kind of informal here. My name's Ellen Wolcott. I'm with the Charleston Huddle and the Coles Progressives, and we're kind of putting this on together. We'll just have our three candidates come up here in front of us all, give them each 5 to 10 minutes to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves, why they want to run for this position, and then open it up to questions. So if you three gentlemen would like to come forward. This is Jason Coombs.
Jason, that's right, Coombs.
Quincy Combs and Jeff Lard. And whoever wants to go first, we go left to right, right to left.
Jason, why not pick the middle?
Feel free.
Okay, well, good evening. My name is Jeffrey Lahr. I've been a resident of Charleston since 1991. I grew up in southeast Michigan, but I do have a tie to Illinois and Charleston in particular, Coles County. My mother grew up here. She grew up on a farm north of Ashmore. And when we moved here in 91, my wife worked for Dr. Fehrenbacher here in town. And my grandmother used to go to Dr. Fehrenbacher, and she would tell all the relatives that her granddaughter was working there. So they would come in, introduce themselves, and she'd come home and tell me, I met your cousin so-and-so today. And I said, I don't know who that is, because I didn't grow up here. I would see them at a reunion. Of course, when I was younger, I didn't pay attention to the adults so much. So that's my tie to Coles County. I've been here since 91, so I kind of feel like this is my home. And kind of an interesting story, when we moved here, I didn't want to. My wife she wanted to move here. She's from California, and she liked the rural setting. It was a little too rural for me. And I told her, I said, don't get too settled. I was unemployed for about 8 months, and it was a grant funded position in California, so I was kind of needing something. And I said, don't get too settled. We'll be here, a couple of years, get on our feet, and we'll get out of here. And like I said, that was almost 30 years ago, so this is home for us. Raised my family here. I've been active in the community for a number of years. I've been on the Charleston Area Food Pantry Board. I've been a member of this Charleston School District board member, a number of other committees. I've been a city council member since 2005. The reason I want to continue to serve is my entire career has been in public service. I enjoy it. I love doing it. I enjoy working with people. And to serve on council or the school board is like a natural extension of that. I think what I bring to the council that a lot of my current council members don't have is, as the administrator for the mental health board, I have the administrative perspective as well as the being on the council and school board longer, the years ago. I have both perspectives. I have the board perspective, the legislative council perspective, and I have the administrative perspective. But I also understand where to draw the line and not to step over that line, because the board that I serve, I wouldn't want them to do that to me. So I get that. Being on council, I've had the pleasure of being involved in a number of projects that are very important to Charleston, recreation projects in particular, the Trails Project, the trail. When I worked at the Regional Planning Commission in the 90s, our office was the one that got the Rails to Trails grant that coordinated when they first converted the railroad to the bike trail. The intent was for it to go further into Ashmore, I think, but something happened to the bridge there at the river, so that kind of it stopped there now. Private landowner had that opportunity, and that was certainly within their rights. But I've always been involved with environmental issues. I was the solid waste and recycling coordinator for the county for a number of years. I went to school in Humboldt State University in Arcata, California. So I kind of call that, even though I grew up in southeast Michigan, I kind of call that as my environmental indoctrination. And it was a very good blend and a learning experience, obviously, in college. But the whole, if any of you have been to Arcata, I went there in the 80s. It was kind of like going back in a time warp into the 1960s. The university was small, about 6,800 people, similar to what we have now here at Eastern. but the average age of the student was 26, 27 years old. So we had older students, we had a lot of environmental issues, and I really enjoyed it. It was a good experience. And so my degree was in geography, but I had an emphasis in natural resources and resource conservation. So it's kind of been a passion of mine through the years. The solid waste recycling coordinator position at the regional planning was just kind of even though I wasn't too keen on the areas, and forgive me, I've learned differently, the opportunity sounded good because it was kind of something I was interested in. Like I said, I've raised my family here. This is home. Plan on staying here through retirement, and hope to continue to work with you folks and serve you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Oh, first I'd like to thank Coles Progressives for putting on this forum. We really appreciate having an avenue to be heard. As many of you may or may not know, my name is Quincy Combs, lifelong resident of Charleston. Actually, my family's lived here for 5 generations. My wife Vivian's here with me. Her family's lived here for many, many years also. Between us, we have 7 children and 15 grandchildren, most of them still live in the Charleston area, so we have a vested interest in Charleston, as you might see. And I just love Charleston. I've worked for the city of Charleston for a little over 37 years, basically my whole life. I had a couple of little part-time jobs before I went to work for the city. I retired January 31st of last year. Been a public servant like Jeff all my life. I love doing it. I still see it as being a public servant. I don't necessarily, a lot of people nowadays, I think they think of it as a job. I saw it as, hey, the public was always my boss, and I needed to listen to the public while I was in Public Works for 37 years, the last 20 as superintendent of streets, sidewalks, and managed the street garage that maintained all the equipment. So I'm retired now and I've got time. And I've got a lot of ideas. I've worked for the city from the inside and I feel I have a well-rounded perspective because I started as just a laborer here. I was a union member. I was eventually become the head of the union, the local union, and then moved into management and was, like I say, superintendent for 20 years. So I negotiated union contracts. I've seen it from the inside, but I've also seen it from the management side. Managed millions of dollars in money. I had the motor fuel tax budget, which is one of the largest budgets the city has. So, I have that experience of managing those budgets and know where that money comes from and how it can and where it should be spent. So that's kind of the reason I want to be back on city council, be back involved as a public servant, is because that's what I do. Don't really have any other hobbies since I retired, and I think being on city council, you can be as involved or as hands-off as you'd like to be. I'm more the hands-on type. And like I said, I think I bring that perspective of I've seen it from the inside, and anybody in here that's worked for any organization and worked on the inside has experienced that of, hey, I've saw it from this side. I think we could change things, and not that things are bad. I'm not saying that at all. Jeff and these guys have done a good job, but I just have some new ideas and from a different perspective. So that's one of the things I'm interested in. I've also, as superintendent, was always cautious and wanted to preserve the historic part of Charleston. I was one that really pushed to have the stone arch bridges rebuilt and tuck pointed and fixed up. The Camelback wooden bridge, I also promoted getting that repaired and getting it back useful. The water fountain in front of this building, just 2 years ago, we rebuilt some sidewalk and stuff and the steps to the front of this old library. I saw this beautiful old fountain sitting there. I said, well, why is this fountain not operational? And I talked to Cheryl Snyder, which had been over the library for many, many years. She was, oh, that thing's never worked. I said, well, let's get it working. So I took the crews, we pulled the fountain up, we took it up to our shop, we completely rebuilt it. Now that beautiful fountain, in case if you haven't seen it, you go out front and see that fountain. It is really neat. It's now operational because I'm really interested in historic preservation. My wife and I live in one of the oldest houses in Charleston on Monroe, and I really want to see the historic part of Charleston preserved. Was at the chamber dinner last night. Talked to Ryan Strange. He's also a local young man that's an entrepreneur here in Charleston. He has spent a lot of time and energy starting to do some revitalization of the square, including putting a butcher shop up there. He's bought some other buildings that he's revitalizing, and I think, being on council, I would really like the city to get behind him, which they already have some, but really get behind him and help revitalize the square and at least clean it up. I saw it from the inside. I think we should, take power washers up there and at least clean it up and maybe redo the trees up there that are getting overgrown and popping up sidewalks and all that stuff. I think we need to fix all that stuff. A couple of the other things is, support the local business. I think a small community like ours has to reinvest in our own community. The most successful small communities that reinvest in themselves are the most successful. One of the things I did when I was superintendent is I dealt with a lot of money, and my first priority was to always purchase things locally first, if possible. I would go to the local Rural King and buy equipment or small equipment we needed for the street department. And even when I shopped for large equipment, tractors and snow plows and whatever, I would try to buy them local if possible. That's not always possible, but I also had a method. If I couldn't buy what I needed in Charleston, try to buy it in Mattoon, try to buy it in Coles County, try to buy it in the state of Illinois. That money turns over many, many times if we reinvest it here and create our own jobs. So that's a whole nother thing. I would even be interested in maybe a resolution for all the city management to look at that and say, if we can buy anything and even pay a little bit more for it in Charleston, we should still go ahead and purchase it in Charleston rather than buy it on Amazon or whatever. I was at the chamber meeting and the local PAP printing was the small business of the year. That's the kind of businesses we need to support. We need to be here and we need to make sure that we use the city funds to reinvest in our own businesses. Well, I think most of the other stuff, I've handed out these cards. I do have a Facebook page, Charleston First. You're welcome to go on there. Just got it up and running, not a lot on there yet. This information is on there. I will be adding more information as I get to it and have time. Obviously, everybody wants industry and jobs and restaurants. I don't think we're going to attract the big restaurants. We don't have the interstate that Mattoon has. But we do have some local people that do have restaurant experience, and I think we need to go to them and talk to them and say, we want to get behind you and we want to help you. And I know some of that's been done, but I have some different ideas in the fact that we can offer, use our own labor and build parking lots and build entrances off of Lincoln Street and help these people get started and support them and show them we're going to support them with the labor and in-kind services to change that out. Lastly, I think we need to help the citizens. I think we need to be more service oriented. Right now we have the leaf drop site, which was something that I actually created years ago. And I'd like to expand on that. I'd like to see curbside leaf pickup and limb pickup for everybody. We have a lot of elderly that can't pick the leaves and limbs up. Even the people that are able-bodied may not have a truck, may not have access to a truck, whatever. For very little cost, if people would just put their stuff in biodegradable bags, put them on the curb. We put a couple of part-time college students or whatever in a couple trucks. They drive around a couple days a week, throw them in the back, haul them off for you. Helps everybody. Might even work with Eastern to try to get some of the students to come out and rake leaves for the elderly. This way they just have to rake them out to the street, put them in bags, we pick them up and haul them off. Beautifies the whole town, and it allows us to maybe put some pressure on those that don't take care of their lawns to get them cleaned up, to say, look, well, this is all you have to do. Get them to the street, we'll clean them up. So that's one of the other things I'd like to do. One other thing is I'd like to see the city hire its own master gardener. We don't have any master gardeners on staff. I've seen what John Collins did with the county park or the township park. Morton Park's actually a township park. I don't know if you understand that's different than city parks. I'd like to have our own master gardener, but would do more and spend more time actually beautifying our own parks and our own roadways. I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I've got more cards if anybody doesn't have any. Like I said, you're welcome to go to my Facebook page, message me. I answer any questions you've got at any time. Thank you.
Nice. All right, well, I'm Jason Koontz, for everybody that may not know me. So I'm not a Charleston native, but I've lived here for just a little over 20 years now. Kind of like Jeff, I actually really didn't want to move here either at the beginning. My wife is from Charleston, born and raised, so Nicole Lang, that's her name if any of you guys know any of the Langs. But so got a 19-year-old daughter. She's been through the Charleston school system. She's attending Lakeland right now. Plans on going to EIU for the education department. Wants to be a teacher, wants to stay in this town, you know, so I have plenty of investment still in where it's going, you know, and I've lived in, I've thought about it a lot, like what are the specific issues, but let's face it, the biggest thing in Charleston is the health of EIU, right? Like Charleston is EIU, EIU is Charleston. If the college is doing well, we're doing well. If not, we're not doing well. So I think there's roles that the city could help play in, how do we recruit potential students and potential citizens that come in, right? Some of these kids come to school, they may get a job in their field, they're here, One of the big things that I see that's good for Charleston too is we have the state track meets, right? Like that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. I mean, we never really have a lot of good weather for it. I mean, I'm surprised they still keep coming, right? But we need to be rolling the red carpet out for these kids. Like these are the kids that could potentially come stay in the dorms for the weekend and go, wow, this was a fun town. The community loves us. They did a parade, whatever it is. We should do something for these kids when they're here to let them know that we appreciate them being here, right? There's a lot of different things I think that the city could probably help with doing that. I mean, we do have a nice square. We've invested in the square up there in the buildings, but what do we do there? I work in a small town in Sullivan, Illinois. They have once a month in the summer, they shut their square down, right? They have local artisans there, they'll have a beer tent, whatever it is, right? And that allows different parts of the community to come out, mingle, buy locally from local artists, whatever it may be, hire local musicians, have entertainment, right? These are all good things. And that can bring people to come into some of these empty buildings on the square, artisan shops, like the butcher shop, great deal, that's awesome. This town's been needing something like that for a long time, but what else can we bring in besides that, And I think even having those businesses without actually having events up there to where people are going to be walking around, right? Like that's what you do. So I think there's ways that, us working with EIU and actually the students that are here now, we should talk to those students. Have a forum for them and say, hey, what does Charleston mean to you? What are you guys lacking here? What can we do to help you guys here? Whatever that may be. I mean, they have a big voice in this town, that a lot of times doesn't get heard, So I think the city could definitely help on that aspect. Another thing too is we're a college town. We're pretty culturally diverse here as well, right? Like, we should celebrate that. Maybe have some of our foreign students come in, have something, a little festival set up on the square for a weekend and, introduce their culture to the rest of the citizens of Charleston, right? Like, these little things, and what they do is they bring these sides together, because I've kind of seen that since I've lived here, where you have EIU over here and then you have your residents of Charleston over here, right? There's not a lot of togetherness in that. And I mean, we've got to figure out ways to bring the students and the community together in a way that makes sense for everybody. And that's going to bring more, kids are going to tell their friends, hey, people in Charleston love us. No, don't get me wrong, I get it. Like, you're going to go down 4th Street on a weekend and you're going to see a bunch of trash and beer cans and whatever else it may be, right? But that's part of the deal, right? We can't just, look at these kids and go, oh, well, shut them down, you know what I mean? Like, they're tearing everything up around here. They're college kids, right? Like, this is what they do for at least a little bit, right? So that's probably one of the biggest things I'd like to do. But as far as industry, I know this town's seen it. I was affected when Trailmobile went under. I worked for Stoner Products, Howard Meacham. We made parts for refrigerated trailers, right? For Trailmobile over there. And, when they went under, that impacted this town a lot, the factories are gone. They're not coming back. We know that. That's gone now. We need to be looking forward. What are the new revenue industries that are coming through? And I think one thing that's, is already enacted, it's regulated, is medical cannabis. I really believe that Charleston should have a medical cannabis dispensary here for patients to have the right to go get their medicine, right? It's compassionate, This isn't, and let's be honest, recreational cannabis is coming to Illinois. Whether you like it or not, it's coming, And I think we should start thinking about putting things like this in ordinances. As far as I know, there's nothing on the books right now. I don't know that anything's allowed like that here, right? And from the research that I've done, I don't believe it exists, you know what I'm saying? So I think that if we could come up with just some common sense things, it's not, it's not a Grateful Dead concert, right? Medical cannabis is not, it's a real thing. And I'm actually a medical cannabis patient, just so you know. I legitimately am. And I see a whole range from epileptic, people that have epilepsy, MS. I see people in their late 80s maybe fighting cancer, whatever else it is. And this is compassion for these people. They come in, they're able to get their medicine, they're not scrutinized for it, but some of these people are driving to Effingham. They got to drive an hour and a half away to go do this, or they got to go to Champaign, or wherever else it is. Now, think about the revenue loss there too. You have these people that are driving all this distance. It's going to be an hour or so away. Maybe they need to get groceries. They're probably going to have to get gas. They're going to have to do something else, right? Like, they're going to spend money in that community where it's at. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that there. And I know that that's, a lot of people may not agree with that, and we've got a big opioid problem in this town as well, and a lot of towns in central Illinois and the whole U.S. And that can be a big proponent in the fight for that. Allowing people, there's an opioid pilot program right now that's going into effect, and people will be able to, instead of getting opioids filled, have a dispensary card for 90 days, whatever it is. They go in, they get medicated, they're gone. And then they're off. They don't have the card anymore, right? They haven't spent 90 days taking a fentanyl patch or whatever else it is, and then having withdrawals, and then becoming addicted to pain pills, which leads to black market drugs, as we all know, right? These people are being priced out of their medication in the opioids. So what do? They turn to the black market. That's why heroin's came back. That's why we have a problem with that stuff. And I really believe that if we give people the opportunity, to partake in this, a regulated thing, albeit, right, that we could see an impact on that. So, those are like the main things that I look at that I can see in this town. These are different things, I get it, you know. I mean, a lot of people may not like to hear that, but, you know, I believe that, and from what I've seen in my personal experience with it, it can help this town. And it can help the community members of this town be able to get their medication. So that's all I got for right now. But I'm happy to take any questions about that.
We are EIU. EIU is Charleston. So that's obviously the first and foremost. Economic development is the second. And we've done a number of things, we as a city. And I say we, I want to take just a moment, kind of sidebar. The council, because we have a city manager form of government, when I say we, the council is not the driving force. We are a legislative body. We set the budget and policy. Okay. Now, we have a good rapport with the city manager and his staff, and there's a lot of communication that goes back and forth. So we're kept informed, but we don't drive the initiatives. We may drive them behind the scenes, you know, and we have the city council retreat every year, which is really a wonderful thing for the department heads to come together and meet with us. And sometimes it's just a straw poll vote. What do you guys, you like this? Are we going in the right direction? Yes, a thumbs up, thumbs down. And that gives them a lot of feedback. But economic development, back to that, we've worked with, we used to do economic development, as we say, you know, we can't attract the manufacturing. We aren't geographically, we're not close enough to I-57, et cetera, et cetera. But we can attract retail and services. And what we used to do the old-fashioned way is we, you know, put nice glossy flyers and send them out to all the different companies that we would like to attract. Through the process, we've learned that that doesn't go anywhere, because these companies, these retailers, they have consultants, marketing firms that they go with. So when they get something like that, they take it, look at it nice, and set it aside. So we've learned through sending staff to different conferences that we market and we engage with these marketing firms now. And we've been fairly successful. We've actually hired a marketing firm to help us kind of teach us and teach our developers. We brought in developers from throughout the community to say, you know, this is what we want to do. We want to revitalize our efforts, and they appreciate it. The different developers here in town, you know, they were energized by that. And we've seen some results of it. The economy impacts that, of course. So it's been limited because of the economy. The last one, what I would say is the threat. I call it a threat, and no disrespect to the state budget and the situation there. It's not going to get better. It hasn't gotten better. And that is a threat, as I'm sure you're aware of. You've seen where the funding from the state, you know, they're withholding this, they're not supplying that, and it continually puts a squeeze on the local governments, not just the city of Charleston, the townships, the county, the school districts, everyone. So those are the three areas I think are of particular interest, pressing interest.
I have to agree with Jeff and Jason on EIU. I mean, obviously, you know, that's our largest employer, and so we have to find ways to be more attractive to the students to want to come here. We're in a situation now that the new census comes up in 2020. Well, our population is going to be way down when that census goes through, and that's really going to affect the city budgets. And I don't think we know to what degree that's going to affect us yet, but it's going to be, Jeff probably knows more of the dollar than I do. I'm not in that situation right now, but I do know it will affect us a lot. And so we really need to keep the numbers up at EIU, try to grow our community. So I think that definitely, I kind of agree with Jason. Try to have some events on the square, give the college students something to engage with. My idea of the leaf raking and getting the fraternity, sororities, whatever groups on Eastern to come out and give us a day or two to clean up properties for older people and stuff and rake their leaves. And, we'll make it as easy on them as we can. But, I think we've got to create a friendly atmosphere for students, so when they leave here, they talk to their younger siblings or whatever and say, hey, you want to go to Eastern, it's a neat place to go. It's, it's a great place to live. So that's one of our top priorities, obviously, like I said, the population thing. Also, what I've seen in Charleston from being on the inside is our own city employees don't live in the city of Charleston. I don't know the exact numbers, but I would venture to say over 50% of the 140 some employees last I knew, don't quote me on the numbers because I don't know the exact numbers, but over 50% of our own city employees don't live in the city. Can we force them to do that? Yeah, that's kind of up in the air, and I don't know if I'd want to force people, but we can encourage them to live in Charleston. We can, set some, make the town better so they want to live in Charleston. And if you think about just those numbers alone, if, say, there's 70 people that work for the city of Charleston that don't live here, that's 70 more potential homes sold, apartments rented. That's huge for the city of Charleston. Those people work for the city, they're making X amount of dollars. They're working class people, every dollar they make is going to be spent here. It's going to be spent at our stores. It's going to be spent at County Market and Rural King and True Value and whatever other stores there are. So I think, as a council member, I would try to encourage in some ways, and maybe even try to come up with some sort of incentive program for the city employees themselves to live here. It gives them a vested interest in the city. They're more interested, their families live here. When they go to work in the morning, they know they're going to make a difference for their own family. Just something to throw out there, but to me, just on a local level, I think that's pretty important. Thirdly, obviously, I kind of have a different view about it. I mean, Jeff, and I understand Jeff's view too. He's like, well, the council's just an advisory board. I think, like I said before, I think that's true in some respect, but you can be as active or inactive in that as you want to be. And I think, I'd like to step up in that active place, and because I'm retired and I have the time, I think I could approach more people. I think I could reach the local restaurant owners and people that are interested in those things and try to get more local business started, try to get good local restaurants started. We know we're not going to attract the big name restaurants here. It's just not possible. As much as we'd like to, it's just not going to happen. So we've got to work with local people that have restaurant experience to try to get us better restaurants. As far as industry, I'm not giving up on industry. I think we can still bring industry in here. I mean, we built this new 1000 North leg up north of town to tie into the interstate, so we have good truck traffic over here. Rural King is here. Rural King is growing like crazy. They're not an industry necessarily, but they are exploding right now, and I think we need to try to bring some of that over to this side of the county. And I think they're going to get big enough, they're going to need to expand into the county. Need to work with Rural King, becoming a big company. So that would be my top three, I think, is being a friendlier place for the students, trying to create new industry and jobs, restaurants, business, and I think that's it.
I mean, you can't argue with that. I think we're all on the same page, really. I mean, those three things. I mean, EIU. EIU is obviously one of the most important things because that's you're bringing in more prospective students, more prospective citizens eventually, right? So they spend money, they do this. We have to make sure that we're maintaining our recruitment of these students and giving them a reason why they should be coming here. Number one. Number two, it's a community thing too. I mean, we need to bridge that gap between the community of EIU and the community that's outside of EIU. You put those two things together, that's going to take care of the first one because people are going to feel comfortable here. And I mean, really, the third thing is obviously it's about our local economy. How do we stimulate that? What can we do? And there's plenty, and I'm sure everybody has ideas that can be done. But the main thing that we should always focus on is what can we do to make Charleston unique, to all these other towns. Like, what can we do here that makes us unique besides the next college town that has 20,000 people that live there, And that's going to come down to our citizens, our people. What do? Like I said, we have plenty of artisans here. We have plenty of musicians. We have plenty of things that we can attract other people when they do come to this town to say, oh, let's go to the little art gallery, or let's eat lunch here at the little cafe, or let's go listen to the band up on the square. Let's do this. You know what I mean? So I think it's simpler in the fact that, yeah, you can try to do all this recruitment, and yeah, we're not going to get a Chili's here, right? But I'd rather have a local restaurant than a Chili's anyway, so they can keep those in other places. But I think it's really about, empowering the citizens here, giving them an opportunity, figuring out ways where we can help them. Because I know there's a lot of red tape to opening a new business. I mean, there just has to be, There's a lot of regulations, a lot of building code regulations. I get that. Like, we have to follow some of that stuff. But, there's been plenty of opportunities in the past that people have come in and seen it's a little expensive here. It's hard to get through some of these things to build this here, So maybe there's ways we can help in that too. But like I said, it's pretty easy. EIU, community, make Charleston unique,
All right, well, I think I'll just ask a sort of broad question about environmental issues. So there are a number of environmental issues that are important in this town, some of which are being addressed, or there have been some initiatives, some not. For example, local pollinators and insects are in big trouble. And there's been a lot of loss of habitat because farmers are, plowing edge to edge of their property and so on. So there's been some initiative to take some of the public property in Charleston and do native planting. Some of us have done that in our own yards, created prairies and woodland areas and things that provide habitat for insects and other wildlife. And so one concern I have is to try and move in that direction. There are environmental issues connected with that. For example, there's a lot of use of herbicides in this town that people use on their lawns, which are a lot more dangerous than people think. There's a lot of energy and noise that goes into mowing lawns, for example. So I'd like to see some initiative to change the way we think about what makes a nice property or a nice park, as it was Mr. Holmes was talking about having a gardener and so on, improving the parks. There's been an initiative to bring solar power to this region, and so that addresses yet another environmental issue, the need to move to renewable energy. So I guess just in terms of what the city council can do, and I don't know what the city council can do to have an impact on these things, but what are your views about what the city council's role can be in dealing with those kinds of environmental issues or initiatives in this area?
Go for it. Well, like I said about having the master gardener on staff, I mean, we could take all of our parks. I agree with you 100% on the pollinators. And, having a master gardener with the knowledge to know how to create those things and maintain those things, I think, is essential. We've got a lot of nice parks, and it was something I was always frustrated with when I worked for the city. We seem to build new stuff all the time, but then we kind of forget about the old stuff. And I'm kind of one that I don't want to build a new addition onto a house that's falling down. So I want to fix what we've got here before we expand on too much other. So I think having the master gardener to work on the pollinators or whatever to beautify that. I mean, we've got the islands on Lincoln that I actually supervised the building of, and there was a kind of a mutual agreement between the city and Eastern on who was going to maintain it, and that kind of fell apart. So the islands were kind of not being maintained like they should be, and that's something that a master gardener could do. I don't know how many of you know John Collins, but John worked for a few years after he retired. He was the Eastern gardener guy, and he worked at Morton Park for 2 or 3 years, and it just became beautiful. I mean, he just did amazing things there, and I'd like to see that. The other environmental things kind of go along with, like I said, about the leaf and limb pickup. I'd like to expand on our leaf and limb drop-off site. I know the company that comes in and does the grinding for us has the capabilities of grinding that into different stages where we can make it a bigger bulk to maybe use for walkways and things like that, clear down to grinding the leaves and making a compost that composts within a year and make really nice compost. We could also add a screen vibrator where you can actually go out there maybe on the off season with some of our help, take that screen vibrator and run the compost through the screen vibrator and actually make really good compost for people to use in their gardens or in their yards or in their flower gardens and on our own stuff. So yeah, I think it's something that's very much needed, and I would be willing to entertain any ideas people had locally to help that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, like, the pollinator thing, that is a big deal. I mean, you know, it doesn't take a genius to look around and notice there's a lot less bees around, especially in the yard. Now, myself, I have a lot of creeping Charlie in my yard, so I don't spray anything in my yard. It's green all year, it's still green right now, but it's a weed, right? So, but we have plenty of bees back there and other things. But yeah, that is a big deal, you know. But as far as what the council can do for that, I mean, you know, that's a good question, because I mean, you know, just like you said, with noise pollution, things like that in the yards, you know, like if you try to put an ordinance in on specific times you could mow or things like this, then you start, you know, kind of really getting on other people's boundaries on, well, what time do you get off from work, right? Like, well, I work till 6 or 7, right? I may not be able to mow until it's just getting ready to get dark, or maybe you didn't get a chance to mow and you get one of them nice little signs in your yard that everybody looks at, right? Like, you don't want to be that guy, right? So, but I know what you're saying, and you know, encouraging more people not to really care about the, you know, the perfectly fresh cut grass that's green all through the drought and whatever else it is. I mean, that's more of a thing where people have to be educated on. Here's why. You know what I mean? I don't know that, you know, the council could try to do something like that, and I believe it's obviously it would be, you know, something they should do. I mean, or at least entertain the idea of like, what are the different things that we could do to make this happen, you know? As far as the solar energy thing goes, I think that's directly related back to our city buildings, EIU, anything that's in this community that's part of the community, we should be looking into putting solar panel or any type of alternative energy forms into that. I mean, that's another big thing, because if we do that, that progresses us above other communities that aren't doing that. So that's another thing that can fall into the category of what makes us unique. Why do we do things that other places don't do, right? So I'd be all for the solar thing. I think it's a great idea. You know, obviously I'd need more, you know, information about it, like, because there's initial cost, right, to retrofit these buildings, put the technology on there, but you know, the long-term cost is obviously less by doing it that way. So, yeah.
Well, actually, we have been involved in different projects addressing those issues. The UBI, the Urban Butterfly Initiative, there's a plot out here for the parking lot. There's one at the Lake Charleston Pavilion. I understand we had at least 1 or 2 staff members that's been very involved in that and partnering with the different entities. And that's really cool. On my part, just, you know, as the administrator of the mental health board, and we own the old hospital there, the Center for Human Services on 18th Street, we started the community garden project a couple years ago. We've gotten a grant recently from the Charleston Charitable Foundation to put a greenhouse in. And another component of that, what we're looking into is beehives for that, because I understand, and my daughter's very much in touch with the bees and the honey, and I can't remember the terminology, beekeeping. That there is a threat, and specifically because of the pesticides that we spray on our yards. And like Jason, I have a drought-resistant lawn. Right? It's crabgrass and everything else, but it stays green for most of the time, and that works for me. As far as solar energy, again, at the Center for Human Services, I'm looking into solar energy for the building. And I think that we have this huge 39,000 square foot roof plus outlying area, grass areas that I want to explore that option. I know, and I kind of am following suit with the city and the city council's initiative, is we are heavily engaged and starting to look at contractors and talk to contractors about solar energy for the wastewater treatment plant, the water treatment plant, were the two big energy users. And I think, was it about, again, this was November when I heard these figures, about $160,000 a year in energy at the wastewater treatment plant. That we can utilize that, and the concept is we would have a third-party contractor, and there's two ways of doing it, owning it outright or doing it this way. And have a third-party contractor own the facility, and you negotiate, and with 7 years or whatever time frame you specify, you can come to agreement. We're looking at a 7-year buyback. Then we buy it for depreciated value, and then we've got that $160,000 a year to pay it, to help pay it off and to buy the energy, and after that, it's free and clear on us. So it's a savings advantage. Now, the reason that we're looking into the third-party contractor is that being a local government, we can't take advantage of the tax credits. We don't pay taxes. But the third-party contractor can, which basically brings the price of the system down, the initial investment, because they're benefiting from that. So the depreciation value is there sooner. You're starting, instead of $1 million, you're starting at, say, $750,000 or $800,000. So I'm just throwing big numbers out there just as an example, because of the tax credits that we're not benefiting from. This is all something that is coming out fairly recently, but again, and if I said earlier that the city council members' role would be very passive, I apologize. I didn't mean to give that impression. We have an active role, but we are not the day-to-day managers. So that's the part I was trying to get across. But this has been things we've been talking about for a number of years. And to our credit, to our benefit, we have staff at city council or at the city hall that they're talented individuals. We've lost some; they've retired. But we have individuals there that we have these discussions at the retreats and at council meetings, or if I'm going into the city hall and I talk to Kurt and he says, hey, what do you think about, and he and I have been talking a lot about the solar energy because of my interest for our building with the mental health board, but also with the city. So this is something that we've been thinking about. We can go back to being energy conservation. The new water treatment plant, it's been built, 15 years now? The water treatment plant? It's not new, but it's new for us, kind of. The whole concept of using, pumping it, instead of we had pumps that would move the water from this and then pump it to this area with the old one. This one is pumped to the beginning at the top, and from then on it's gravity fed, which saves energy. I mean, it's a little bit, but it still saves energy in the design and concept of the new building. So this is something that we've all been involved with for a number of years. I was raised that way, leave the room, turn the light off, or the ceiling fan, turn the fan off, et cetera, and that kind of plays through. And you'll find me wandering around through the building at the Center for Human Services on the weekends and turning thermostats up or down depending on the time of year, because we're going to be gone for 3 days, and I don't see why this air conditioner needs to be running when nobody's here. Now, along with the solar energy, I'm looking into a system control so that it can be programmable thermostats and things like that. So this is all things that I think about and introduce with and interact with the city staff. So to answer your question is, yeah, we are active in that. We We are actually in the stages of implementing that soon, or hopefully soon, depending on the pricing. You know, we haven't finalized yet. We're talking with developers and contractors as far as the solar energy is concerned.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
Gary, you had another question. I was just gonna, we want to leave a little time for mingling and enjoying the treats, but,
Mine is one person question.
okay. Well, you could
Which
also.
one's gonna get it?
Well, which else gets the hot seat here?
Well, it's a-
All right, go ahead.
Okay, mine was for Mr. Combs.
Yes.
There was an interview with the local newspaper about you retiring and what you were going to do after that. And you had said in that interview that you were looking forward to spending the winters in Florida. Now, let's say, assuming you left in November, came back at the end of winter, which would be March, you might miss half of all the city council meetings. And I'm wondering how you were going to deal with that.
Well, that was kind of misspoken. The way the paper wrote that, that was not the intention. I was leaving that day to spend the month of February in Florida. I think the article, because I've had so many friends of mine, they see me and they're like, well, I thought you were moving to Florida. I thought you were going to live in Florida. Yes, I'm going to Florida, you know, and may spend as much as 3 or 4 weeks down there. But no, I'm not going to be down there for months.
Okay.
And even for those 3 or 4 weeks, we have people on city council right now that they teleconference back in to miss a meeting or two. You know, I don't see that as a problem at all. I did want to touch on the solar energy thing. You can ask my wife. That's something that I have talked about continuing my education, because solar energy is something that I've always just thought was a great idea. I actually have a friend that is very wealthy and owns a big piece of a part of a solar energy company, and he has tried to get me to get involved with him to promote solar energy. So I'm way on board with all solar energy. But no, I'm going to be here. Yeah, I'll take normal vacations, but that's the news. And anybody that's dealt with a newspaper, sometimes you understand that they jot things down and they misrepresent you sometimes. So
Did I say that?
Thanks for the clarification.
No
It sort of
problem.
read that way.
yeah, I understand why you had the question.
Just one question. It was touched on earlier, but obviously medicinal marijuana is a real opportunity, economic opportunity, as well as recreational. We do have industrial hemp now legal in the state and federally, and we have a new business that popped up, CBD oil. You know, so industrial hemp is an opportunity. Charleston could, pop up some, a processing plant for, or provide some investment opportunity to get that ball rolling in the area. We could become Fuse, EIU, have some research potential. You know, there's a real, you could create 70 jobs, right off the bat with a processing plant, and then put some of these empty buildings to work, with manufacturing jobs. What are your views on all of those? The medicinal marijuana here, because I know you're for that. I know,
Of course.
but for the industrial hemp and on all those kinds of business opportunities for the city.
I don't have an issue with it. I know there's a stigmatism with some people. I don't have that stigmatism. We talked about a little bit about recreational. The only reservation I have about recreational is, and I'm not a law enforcement officer, so it's really not my issue, but it's going to be an issue that needs to be addressed. If you have a drink, it's relatively, there's a short period of time till that alcohol is no longer affecting your system, or the traces of it. With marijuana, that if at least what I was told, it stays in your system much longer. You don't feel the effects. So the problem I can see, the potential issue is, okay, I recreate smoke on Friday evening. I don't go to work till Monday, and then Tuesday I have a car accident, and they check for were you drinking, etc. And for some reason my blood registers that it has that in it. Well, the effects are no longer with me, but So what I'm worried about is the legal ramifications of what, and that's not a city issue, so I'm getting out of the realm. But that's kind of something that the only hiccup that I can see, other than, like I said, if there's someone who's just opposed to it, there's people that are opposed to drinking.
Right.
And then that's just, that's their personal feelings. But you asked how I feel individually. I don't have an issue with it at all. I don't know that I would partake of it, but I don't drink much either, so it's just me.
I also have no issue with it. Actually, I welcome it. Any new business or industry. I mean, it's a controlled area. It's a controlled thing. I compare where we're at with marijuana today to where we were at with prohibition. It's not something everybody wants to put themselves out there and talk about, but most of the people in this room are from the 60s and 70s, and we've all probably experimented it at least at some point in time. And I think it's going to be regulated to the point, obviously we know there's medical, my own sister died of cancer a year ago, and she was used medical marijuana to ease her pains and to get through some of her nauseas and stuff. So yeah, it has its place, no doubt. And if we can open any type of business here that's going to create jobs, then I'm with Jason on that. I mean, yeah, let's open them up. I'm all on board with it.
Okay, so we thank our